Welcome to Why Not Read Alpha Flight with Chris and Tom, a podcast where we take your favorite series seriously. I'm Chris Baker.
And I'm Tom Flynn. This season, we'll be looking at Canada's premier superhero team, Alpha Flight.
Because in the words of the famous philosopher whose name escapes me, why not?
We're going from the beginning and looking at what made Alpha Flight work, what didn't work, and taking a romp through a lesser-read but much-loved realm of the 616. Today, we have our first multi-issue story arc. Yay!
Woohoo!
Including a new arch-nemesis and the loss of a team member. Let's hit it.
Alpha Flight number 2, Shadows of the Past, cover date October 1983. Written and drawn by John Byrne, inked by John Byrne and Terry Austin, colored by Andy Yankus, lettered by Tom Orzechowski, edited by Denny O'Neil and Jim Shooter. Issues 3 and 4 have the same creative team, except 4 is lettered by Rick Parker, so we'll skip that later on.
We open with a team exercise, the full team practicing together, minus Snowbird.
So this is an excuse to show powers and say names. If this was an X-Men comic book, it would be the Danger Room, or if it was the Fantastic Four, it would be in the gym where Ben and Johnny, fight.
But instead, we're just in the great outdoors that is Canada, which is
breathing that fresh, wholesome air, drinking that crisp, clean water, kicking back with shots of maple syrup, Tom.
Well, and given that every other time we've been in the great outdoors of Canada, the Wendigo or some sort of land monster has tried to kill them, possibly more dangerous than the Danger Room or the Fantastic Four's gym.
Okay, so last issue they fought Tundra, which means that they literally fought the great outdoors, and they beat it, and now they're playing on top of its corpse. So you know what? That's metal AF. Shaman and Vindicator do have a conversation here that's worth noting, where Shaman finally gives JMH his permanent name. He says, "You represent the nation, and while you feel you have much to vindicate, Canada does not."
JMH says, "You're suggesting my name should be more in keeping with our image, like Guardian?"
That was apparently the name that John Byrne had brought to the character and got editorially overwritten a couple of times, apparently. But now that he's in charge of the book, he can do whatever he wants. Also, quick note, Shaman, my dude, you, of all people, know that Canada has people who do have much to vindicate, but not in the name of government.
Yeah, and I appreciate his optimism. And as we learn more about Shaman, we understand where that optimism is coming from. It might be the one thing holding the dude back from the brink.
As the training session wraps up, our two newly promoted Beta Flight members, Marrina and Puck, have a moment that is touching. Oh, you see what I did there, Tom?
Oh, God.
Quick reminder, Marrina is a green fish lady with big black fish eyes, and Puck he's a disturbingly hairy dwarf in a unitard. So, now that you can set the scene in your head, as Marrina begins acting weird, Puck reaches out to try to console her because these two characters know each other in a way that the other Alpha Flight members don't. Remember, they just met Puck and Marrina in the last issue of the comic book. So this is a getting to know you for them. So as Puck reaches out, Marrina attacks him, and not just like a smack, like she guts him. His insides are now his outsides. And then she dives into a conveniently adjacent body of water that opens to the sea and disappears at her astounding speed. She apparently goes faster, or as fast as the Speedster twins, Northstar and Aurora, in the water, if not faster, and that's just an astonishing amount of force that she can generate.
It's one thing to be flying through the air at that speed, but with water resistance, that's, frankly, Puck's lucky that he didn't just atomize when she hit him, if she's able to generate that much power once in the water.
We next see a stabilized Puck in the hospital where Michael has operated on him and saved his life. And I'm wondering, what kind of admitting privileges does Canada use? Because Michael just walks into any hospital so far and does his thing.
That would be because he's Michael fucking two young men.
Oh,
I might need to rethink that particular moniker.
You know what? Maybe we just lean into it. He's MFT now.
Oh, dear God.
How does he keep his license current? Does he take like a week off of superheroing because he needs to brush up for his board certification?
I mean, but the thing is, every time that he is interacting with anything outside of like his Alpha Flight duties, everyone, like people on the street, stop and go, "Is that Michael Two Young Men?" Like everyone knows who this dude is. I don't know. I don't really think he has too much trouble like with upkeep or anything.
Name recognition doesn't get you past your boards, Tom. Hey, Dr. Oz, Oh,
wow.
So, Walt and James McDonald Hudson, aka the notorious JMH, race off to find Marrina.
We then cut over to Snowbird. This gives some context to why she wasn't at the training. Her alter ego, M. Mackenzie, working in the remote RCMP office in the Northwest Territories. And I just want to suggest that maybe this was the point of giving her this identity and placing her where she is. Alpha Flight is spread out conveniently and somewhat efficiently across the entire country. And Canada is really big. And as near as we can tell, we really just kind of have Alpha Flight. So why not have everyone sort of in a different spot? So when things pop off, you've got at least one superhero relatively nearby to address the issue until the rest of the team can convene.
You know, that makes sense to me, particularly for the twins, because you can put them anywhere in Canada and they'll be wherever you need them in under a minute. But Snowbird is a bit more limited in her travel. Shaman is able to teleport using his magic powders, so he's also incredibly mobile. But maybe locating the lady who can fly at the speed of a bird, wait, I don't know. I'm not in charge of Alpha Flight, but this is once again a testament to JMH's organizational genius.
One last point. Yes, she can fly at the speed of a bird. However, we've already established that it's a big goddamn bird. So how fast can that bird fly is a completely different question and frankly unknowable. We're done. We're done talking about this. We're moving on.
Snowbird suddenly detects that Shaman has invoked the Great Spirit and she rushes out the window. And this is workplace sitcom superhero stuff. The boss is mad that she's always rushing off. It feels very cut and paste and placeholder. We do get to meet her coworker, Thompson, who will become more important soon.
We might also have answered the question of how does Snowbird being so out of the way work, because Shaman invokes the name of the Great Spirit. However, the rest of the team hasn't left yet. So he says the Great Spirit, which gives Snowbird a heads up to start heading somewhere so that by the time the rest of the team gets there, she's not that far behind. It's not like the battle has popped off and she has to cover thousands of miles.
You're fighting hard for this one, Tom.
I'm really, I don't know why, but right now I need this very, very badly. So here we are.
So Walt and JMH have picked up North Star and Aurora, our speedster twins, in the previously unseen Alpha Jet. It's described as an Omni-Jet. It looks like a GoBot Quinjet from the Avengers. It does have a cool AF logo on the tail, and that's a neat icon branding, but I don't think we see again. Don't get too attached to the Alpha Jet.
En route to Marrina's location, the rest of the team rather demands an explanation as to her origins, considering that she just, ripped apart one of their new team members and supposedly a long-term team member of her own. So JMH has to and does fill in the rest of the team on the origins of Marrina.
18 years ago, a Newfoundland fisherman named Tom Smallwood was knocked overboard in a storm and dragged to the bottom of the bay, where he found a glowing green egg that he picked up, and it buoyed him to the surface in time to save him. Tom takes the egg home to his wife and 5-year-old-ish grandson, Dan. We met an adult Dan Smallwood when Marrina first got her call in Alpha Flight number 1. Smallwood's wife helps the egg hatch, and the gooey green creature inside imprints upon her and takes on a female-ish human form. She has large black eyes with no irises, like a fish's eyes, black eyes, doll eyes, like a shark, I mangled that. She is green, she's scaly, but she has what appears to be like humany hair on top. I mean, she's a fish lady, fish lady. The Smallwoods raise this fish lady in their small Newfie community, and apparently Newfoundland is a great place to be a weirdo because she grows up completely normal and accepted by everyone around her. So somebody here had a very nice childhood. Pleasant change of pace.
And look, it's an insular community and one that rocks along with superstition. I'm sure Marrina was actually not the oddest looking kid in her pre-K.
When Marrina turned 16, her incredible swimming speed kicked in, and Guardian tells us that 10 months later, Dan Smallwood contacts the Ministry of Defense and Marrina becomes the first member of Beta Flight.
We've learned quite a bit about the Smallwoods, like willing to raise someone that's not their own, but the moment that they demonstrate something rather unusual, they turn right into a narc. Like just narc.
Doing the math, this was a little over a year ago in the page time. So he says whatever caused Marrina to attack Puck isn't something that Department H's psychological tests could pick up.
Yeah. Department H psychologists, because those are the top men. Top Men.
Marrina emerges from her rapid swim into a cavern of ice, with technological elements shot through it. She's compelled to enter the cavern, compound hybrid thing. It's like the ice and the metal are growing together, so it's kind of a cool image. But she feels no fear at her surroundings.
It occurred to me, actually, in conversation with my daughter, that the look of this thing is kind of like when someone pours, like, liquid metal into an ant colony
Oh,
to
yeah.
like, and then they unearth it, and it has this really, like, a combination of an inorganic organic shape, and that's very much what this facility looks like when Marrina enters it. And then when we do eventually get an exterior shot of, like, the size of it, it really does have that feel to it.
Marrina is soon faced with Alpha Flight's first non-Great Beast villain, the Master. He's seated in a chair surrounded by like a techno cocoon, kind of like Vader's chamber from Empire Strikes Back. He has a big helmet thing over his head, but not below the nose, with a red triangle pointed down to the nose. Big metal ring around his shoulders. It's a choice. I mean, but it has a cape. Has a red cape, so points for that. Capes on villains are baller. If I were super villaining, this is not a look I would rock while seated in a chair because the cape is lost. Totally wasted. The shoulder ring doesn't cast an intimidating silhouette. Who taught this guy how to super villain, Tom?
The helmet under the nose does seem to be a bit of a burn motif. Maybe Masters intentionally styled to look a little bit like a counterpart to Guardian, which feels like a stretch, but that is our Alpha Flight fashion critique portion of the episode. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. This brings us to issue number 3, Yesterday Man, cover dated October 1983. And Chris already covered all of the folks involved in the creation of this comic, so I'm not going to.
Hey, Tom, I'm going to let you finish, but I wanted to take a moment to remind our listeners, if you'd be so kind, could you please rate and review us on wherever you found us and wherever you're listening to us right now? We're not normally going to ask you up front like this, but we're a new podcast, and we would really appreciate if you could help support us like that. And with that, we'll take you back to issue number 3. Now, Tom, talk to me about this cover, because this is...
It's really striking. It has Aurora surrounded by bars of some sort, just like white bars kind of collapsing in on her, jutting at her, but it's otherwise totally dark. So the white and the black blend in with her uniform such that where the the darkness, the negative space begins and her uniform ends is really unclear.
Oh, absolutely unclear. It's totally inked black together, and we only get the white parts in her face, and it's very stark, and her face looks terrified. Oh, if I was going to have a cover framed on my wall, it would be this one from Alpha Flight.
Huh.
It's a really cool cover, Tom.
No, I'm just of all the covers that.
Oh, you would have the Puck cover, wouldn't you?
Oh, you know it. To each their own.
Well, look, when Byrne is invested and on his game, I really like what he brings to his art.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a phenomenal cover. It really, I mean, like you mentioned that she has a terrified expression on her face. It really does, it engenders a sense of claustrophobia, of terror, of surprise on some level. And given, as we're about to get into, the action of the story and what happens with Aurora, it really does a great job of covers don't always interact with the meat of the issue. This one absolutely does, and has a really strong enhancing effect.
So I take issue with some of the pacings in issues 3 and 4. So we'll be mashing these up a bit to make the story work better for an audio format.
Wait. You never told me this was audio.
Issue number 4 is titled Resolutions, cover date November 1983. Flying toward where she felt Shaman summon the Great Spirit, Snowbird finds the wreckage of the Alpha Jet. Told you not to get too attached.
Alas, poor Alpha Jet. We hardly knew thee. It's also not like they had the funding to get it repaired. Not to mention all the maple syrup they incinerated when they crashed.
So I'm picturing JMH in jorts and a headband sliding out from underneath. Oh yeah, that's gonna be a bigger job than we can handle, boys.
So using her previously unmentioned power of post-cognition, Snowbird rewinds time to see what happened. I don't think we're going to really use that framing again, because if we say previously unmentioned power as it pertains to Snowbird, we'll never get through a single episode, because the lady just keeps rolling them out almost every episode.
She's pretty ill-defined at this point in time. So the jet got shot down, the team bounded out. We really didn't need a 2-page spread of this, but you do you, JB. Snowbird shifts into a polar bear and follows where the team went, and we see Sasquatch moving on all fours like a gorilla, and I don't think we've seen that before. Swinging from trees, yes, but not knuckles to the ground, feet first, like Beast, you know? And also, Tom, I'm going to ruin something for you here. With all this screen time here for Snowbird, I figured out who she looks like.
I really don't like it when you have a surprise for me, but go ahead.
So, listeners, reminder, Snowbird is a white woman with very pale blonde hair. She has black eyes with like white irises in the middle, and they kind of have a neat shape to them. Tom, she looks like Melania Trump.
A mile or so ahead, Northstar and Aurora have been trapped inside the complex while Guardian Sasquatch try to smash their way through a techno wall that cut them off.
The twins, trapped in the utter darkness, are drawn as just faces, and the white parts of their suit, kind of like the cover, really like this negative space art and impressionistic stuff like this. They clap hands to make their light and see a tunnel ahead of them, a very long tunnel that they can't see the end of. Speeding ahead, they are ambushed by poles thrusting from the walls, floor, and ceiling. Northstar is knocked the fug out right away, and Aurora is hemmed in by the ever-increasing columns, exactly what we saw on the cover.
As the columns threaten to impale her, Sasquatch smashes through them and saves the day. But not before Aurora has decided to take the rest of the day. It's been trying, it's been a lot, and she leaves Jean-Marie in charge of the body. JMH goes, "Oh no, I was afraid something like this might happen." She slipped back into her Jean-Marie persona.
Sasquatch is clearly taken by surprise, and he would like to know more about that.
I wouldn't even say he's taken by surprise. It's more a look of, bitch, what? What is this? Who is this Jean-Marie to which you refer?
So they're here to save a person they don't know, Marrina, and now Aurora has become a person they don't know. A lot of secrets here in Alpha Flight, and apparently JMH is the only one who knows anything.
And the top psychologist that they employed to make sure this team was battle ready. Meanwhile, at the exact same time, circling overhead, inexplicably, are Namor the Submariner and Susan Storm the Invisible Woman.
Oh, I can explicate that. John Byrne is writing the Fantastic Four at this time. And as we've mentioned before, Byrne loves playing with Jack Kirby's old action figures way more than Byrne likes making his own toys to play with, which I kind of understand. Byrne is of the first generation who grew up as fanboys and then got to take over playing with their favorite toys. And it's like anybody who makes art, you know, if you make any art at all, you look at it and you're like, oh, that just looks like something I made. But other people look at your art and it looks like something you made that nobody else can make. And so the very thing that artists devalue about it is exactly what people find value in. And it's kind of hard to reconcile that. And I think that that applies a lot to John Byrne and the characters that he creates here, that he thinks they're just, you know, the same as these bullshit whatever that you throw around in the Silver Age, and really thinks that these ones that have stood the test of time are actually worth it. Whereas his are just, you know, some crap that he made to fill out Wolverine's backstory, you know? And it does him a bit of a disservice, but separate the creator from the art, right?
Namor and Sue are here because Namor's investigating some evil something or other in the water. Look, they're here because Byrne said they are, okay? Like, that's just it. You know, it's just a way to get Namor and Sue Storm and a little bit of a FF connection into this comic
they're FFing all right, Tom. So they're scanning a vast complex inside the ice. In fact, it seems to be merged with the ice. And they are suddenly shot down just as the doomed Alpha Jet was.
We then cut to the Master with Marrina in restraints and lots of, like, Waldo arms. Do you mean Waldo or do you mean Inspector Gadget?
Yeah, Waldo, like the things that Iron Man uses in his workshop. Those are called Waldos.
Wow, learn something new every day.
Like those articulated arm things.
Yeah.
I don't know why I know that, but...
Okay. So with lots of Waldo arms pointing needles and knives at her. It kind of looks like a robotic dissection tool because... Funny story.
Thus begins the villain-splaining. The Master's deal is, 40,000 years ago, he was the big hunter for his band of people in the Northlands, but also an asshole, so they kicked him out. He suddenly felt a compulsion to go north, so he went, and along the way passed many other animals on the same path, all dead. He eventually comes across a downed spaceship, utterly enormous in size. This is clearly the facility we have been seeing, but on top of the ice instead of under it, because, you know, 40,000 years.
Upon reaching the ship, he is dragged inside, where the exact same tools and Waldo arms, pointed at Marrina, tear him apart at every level possible while the ship learned what he was made of. Then his brain was made an extension of the ship's computer. He eventually gains control of said computer and had it make for him a new, perfect body.
He's the caveman who touched the obelisk. And also somehow combined with that horrific transformation in Superman 3 where the lady was turned into the robot that absolutely scarred me as a kid. Just terrifying. Have you seen Superman 3, Tom?
Not recently enough to have any memory of what you're talking about.
I have a very strong opinion about that scene, and I bet some of the listeners do. Tell us about it. The Master says that Marrina's origin is tied to this vessel, and he hints at her having a brood mate, which... Ew. Yeah. Female. It sounds like a Ferengi should be saying it. Brood mate. Guardian quickly fills Sasquatch in on Aurora and Jean-Marie's deal. Sass says, and this is the kind of solid, stable material you consider suitable for superheroing?
That's so many S's. I'm really impressed that you were able to do that in that voice.
Guardian replies, no, when I first met her, she was in her Aurora persona. I didn't learn the other side of her until it was too late.
But also, like, too late for what?
Yeah, right. You're in charge. You can fire her.
You can fire her. You can get her help. You can do so many things.
Those aforementioned Department H shrinks, the fuck are they? Huh?
I mean, what? They assess you once and then you don't go in for regular checkups? I mean, they're going into battle and they're not getting like debriefed and checked in on like, did this really screw them up? Is there something we need to worry about in the future? Were they exposed to like a claustrophobic room with bars coming at them and now they shouldn't go into like tight space? Any number of things.
For what it's worth, it's the dark that seems to trigger her. Like while the X-Men Storm has claustrophobia as her problem, for Aurora, the dark is where she retreats because, well, we'll get into that when we get her origin. I hate saying that, listeners, so thank you for bearing with us because there's a lot that gets revealed here.
Jean-Marie conveniently comes around and runs away from what is clearly something Aurora has gotten her into. To note here, she runs on foot, does not fly, does not use powers, just hoofs it out of the way.
Guardian starts to go after her when Sasquatch tells him to go after Northstar because Sasquatch says, quote, I've known her better than you.
To which Guardian says, oh, Walt, you don't mean.
Ask me no questions and I'll tell you no lies, Jimmy.
You can see where Sasquatch is justifiably concerned about the emergence of Jean-Marie, having only ever known Aurora.
Biblically.
Yeah, it was totally redundant. My known got across. It was the biblical known I just said. But moving on, he shifts into Walt magically with underwear and tries to connect with Jean-Marie in a very mansplainy way, which should surprise no one.
I get that Walt isn't very good with fifis or delicate communications like this, but he does a particularly bad job here.
Jean-Marie accesses the memories of Aurora and realizes who and what Walt is to Aurora, punches him, and calls him an animal.
So we got to ask this now. Is Aurora with Walt? Or is Aurora with Sasquatch?
Why do you have to ask these questions?
Jean-Marie just woke up in the dark wearing what she called a very slutty outfit that Aurora got her into this place, and now she suddenly has a visceral sense memory of what Bigfoot's dick smells like. I can see where she's a little upset. Oh, also, listeners, hey, sex. Take a drink.
There's a lot to be said and gotten into about this whole split personality thing and how poorly or well it is handled, but in honor of the tempo of the story and our commitment to getting around to it when we get to Aurora's origin story, we'll touch on that then.
Yeah, we're actually going to bring in some special help to make sure we navigate that territory with some sense of decorum. Guardian finds Northstar. Namor and Sue find the facility. Again, it's enormous, part ice, kind of alive, and I think this is a super cool base and one that is uniquely suited to Canada because it's huge and ice. And that's Canada.
Namor and Sue invisibly sneak up on the Master during his villain-splaining.
The ship they are on is from a race known as the Plodox, an ancient colonizing superpower. They would send colony ships to land on a planet and insinuate itself through the planet for hundreds of years before sending out a call that would compel one of each species on the planet to move towards the ship. Whichever species arrived first was determined to be the dominant life form, like a reverse Noah's Ark. So the dominant species sample was then torn apart, and its genetic info was written onto the millions of egg pairs that the ship houses. Those are then shot through the planet, and the Plodox local life hybrid species takes over the planet and joins the Plodox empire. Except this ship crashed and malfunctioned, firing off its egg cargo before they were programmed. Oh, so it just spewed eggs all over our planet?
Which is gross in its own way, but I also find it interesting that we're having a whole colonization narrative in Canada.
Marrina's egg spent these 40,000 years at the bottom of the ocean and took on amphibious traits before bonding with Gladys Smallwood. Hey, Gladys got a name, Tom.
At this point, Namor and Sue reveal themselves and violence ensues.
Is this a team up? I think it's a team up. Take a drink.
The Master escapes after starting Marrina's torture process. And all this time, he has been seated in his throne chair thing. So, like...
Just keep that in mind. Snowbird enters as a swarm of mosquitoes, again, previously unrevealed power. Did she learn that from Tundra? Had it not occurred to her to try that before?
So this is also like the fourth time she's appeared, and her powers and just her whole deal is really still getting fleshed out.
Guardian and Northstar are smashing vital systems to the base and start the process of wrecking the facility. Guardian has tapped into the computer network using his cybernetic helmet, so he's apparently the tech guy of the team too.
Which, I mean, we could have assumed without cybernetic helmet, but hey.
It's 1984. The word cybernetic is just the future, Tom. The Master seems to have planned for this and responds to the start of the explosions by saying, "Now it begins!" Everyone regroups and the teamed up team bolts outside, and we get an amazing double splash page of the enormous facility self-destructing under the ice. It's split into the same 3 panels that we've seen him do across the double page spread, and I like it. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, it really works here.
As the heroes fill each other in and make plans to get home, Snowbird quickly bolts off alone. She must have had a shift starting soon.
It might not even be at the RCMP headquarters. It might be her barista shift that she does to really make those ends meet.
You know what? I would read a book about Snowbird as a barista.
I think she would make some absolutely stunning latte art. Like, it would be really something special.
Just nice little slice of life.
Which is also why she can't get fired really from the RCMP, because like she makes the best coffee in town and it's a small town. Everyone would be pissed if she like was removed from that location.
Marrina announces she's leaving with Namor to learn more about her people and her amphibious nature. It seems as though Namor and the Atlanteans haven't come across any of these millions of eggs in the 40,000 years that they've been under the ocean. So I guess he's surprised too. I got the impression that he was taking her in order to like scientifically find out more about a threat to his kingdom, but it turns out it was a sex thing.
Yeah, so take a drink.
Yeah, but don't feel good about it. Take like peanut butter whiskey. That's what you should do right now.
Don't ever recommend that again. This brings us to the end of our first solo arc for the team, but that's not all, dear listeners. We now begin what will define the first 11 or so issues of Alpha Flight. Almost all of these issues are less than full-length real-time story, with a short backup story featuring the origin of one of our 06 at the very end of the issue.
It's about 18 pages of real-time story, about 5 pages of backup story, give or take. And as a kid, I loved this. It's like how Marvel would reprint origin stories from time to time for new waves of readers. In fact, as a kid, I thought that these were being republished from somewhere else as a way of saying, hey, just in case you didn't know, this is what you should know, instead of, being the first time you come across the information. So it's very hard to translate the flow of how these backup stories and how the main stories fit together. And it's one of the things that we're doing the greatest disservice to, because it just doesn't work in an audio format. So I highly recommend read these 12 issues. You'll see what we mean.
We begin, as we should, with the story of how James MacDonald Hudson, the anti-Tony Stark, becomes Guardian.
Taking the publication date of 1983 as the present day, this story is set in roughly 1973. James Hudson is working in the R&D section of the Amcan Petroleum Company in Edmonton, Alberta. Later on, they're going to call this the America-Can Company. America, Canada. JMH is informed by his boss, Jerry Jackson, that Hudson's work on a powered exoskeleton suit was not to be used for oil mining, like Hudson thought, but was in fact being turned over to the American military, who funded Amcan's research.
Instead of killing the planet, it was just going to be used to kill other people.
It's a slower scale killing. So you know what? Maybe that's the better use for it.
This is the interesting thing, as we find out, is that JMH was actually on track to be history's greatest monster.
This does close up a little continuity point. You remember I pointed out in the very first issue when he first appeared how JMH burst out from the ground and how it was such an odd angle and everything about the panel seemed weird. It's because the suit was designed for mining. It was designed to tunnel through the ground and be able to make that exact move happen. And then we never see him do it again. You would think it would be helpful against, Tundra or something. Like, he should have been able to, tunnel through and turn him into Swiss cheese or something. It's designed for mining. You're fighting the land.
Given how much oil drilling plays such a huge role, and even logging throughout the Alpha Flight and their appearances, maybe Guardian is the right name for, he's guarding Canada's right to destroy the environment.
You know what? As bad as that makes him sound, he will sound much worse before we hit even issue 50, because Mantlo, Bill, character assassin Mantlo, is really going to take aim at our friend JMH.
Well, and that's your one mention of Mantlo for the episode. I will also point out that by the end of this particular episode, he's also not going to look that great for other reasons.
As he storms out of the meeting, JMH runs into Jackson's secretary, Heather McNeil, who tells him that she has put in her resignation in protest of how Hudson is being treated.
Astute listeners will recall that JMH is married to Heather McNeil Hudson.
She then brazenly invites a great man like you to her place tonight so she can make him dinner. James awkwardly declines and goes home to lament how his work will be used to, quote, blow the blazes out of Southeast Asia.
As opposed to, raping the land of its resources.
But you can't blame him for not wanting his work to be used by the American military in 1973.
Hey, no, that's a legitimate consideration, but so is not building something that just makes mining more efficient so that, whatever.
Yeah, so JMH goes back to Amcan, torches all his files, steals the power suit, and leaves it a mile away from the facility, but he takes the all-important cybernetic helmet. See, cybernetic helmet, Tom. That makes it work, and because he developed it in college before coming to Amcam, and he claims it as his property.
There are a lot of ways that James could have handled this, including never having started, and he chose the one that made the maximum mess of his life. In issue number 3, Heather shows up at JMH's apartment with a hilariously cliched bag of groceries.
Yeah, this is a motif we're going to see for Heather. We've already seen her a couple of times carrying bags of groceries. Later on, in He Who Shall Not Be Mentioned's run, she keeps getting pictured as cooking with an apron in these scenes, as if she was a housewife. But anyway, she knows that as a single-driven man, JMH probably has a bottle of mustard, 2 Molsons, and nothing else in his fridge, and now no job with which to buy more.
Although it's worth pointing out that she doesn't really have a job now either.
Well, she's got one for 2 weeks, and that's fine. Do you remember being young and in love, Tom? She tells him what the office found that morning, and then sees the cybernetic helmet on the coffee table, and immediately realizes that James is in some serious trouble. And her first move is to tell Mac that clearly, Tom, the only course of action here is for them to get married so she can't be forced to testify against him, which is not how things work, Heather.
So ripping off the Band-Aid, Heather says she is just shy of her 18th birthday.
James has a PhD, and for all his brilliance, he isn't ever mentioned as being a child prodigy or anything, so let's put him at an extremely conservative 25 years old here.
Hard disagree here, old buddy. My dude is 32 at the youngest. Young-est.
Heather is many things. She's brave, plucky, bright, resourceful, compassionate, and absolutely frustratingly stubborn. But perhaps most of all, at this moment, Heather is also on track to being a child bride, and she will not let anyone deter her from that goal. She's stubborn.
It's weird.
Let me just say that my oldest is just shy of her 18th birthday, and if she told me she was marrying a 25 to 32-year-old from work that she had no previous relationship with, I would not be cool with that.
And I would help you with that. So does that count as a team up?
Oh, it's a team up, Tom.
Take a drink.
There's been a lot this episode. So Heather makes a call, and soon she and James are headed to Ottawa, the capital of Canada, for those who don't know, to Parliament Hill specifically, which is their capital building, where they barge headfirst into bureaucracy and somehow get to the right desk.
Seeing the potential in Hudson and his work, All of his legal problems go away as Canada declares his helmet to be Canadian property because James is still paying back his government-backed student loan.
Canada now has the helmet back. They can totally just give this back to the Amcan Corporation and everything goes on just fine. And frankly, that may have been the better call for like everybody we're going to meet over the course of the entirety of this podcast. Because instead of doing that, having gotten him off the hook for some serious federal prison time, the Prime Minister himself, Joseph Philippe Pierre Yves Elliott Trudeau, father of Justin, explains to JMH what the cost of this favor will be. James will work for newly established Department H for Hudson, a secret wing of Canada's Ministry of Defense, developing empowered operatives, it seems. He comes home to his child bride to read about the Fantastic Four, who have just appeared on the scene, and in that moment is inspired to remake this team he's in charge of into superheroes.
The story cuts off here, but I kind of read this as JMH falling into a situation that pre-existed him, and he doesn't really understand what he's signing up to getting himself into.
Yeah, them walking in off the street with a crazy story, and then JMH having a job, and not just a job, but like a job with a budget and stuff a few hours later is just as rushed as we made it sound. There are a lot of points left out.
Although Alpha Flight is disbanded with the exact same speed, so maybe this is just how the Canadians like to run things.
At the end of our first solo arc, what do we think?
Well, Alpha Flight as a team is incredibly unstable.
Yeah, both unstable in terms of who is there and unstable in terms of what's going on in each of their heads.
Just when we meet these new members, one is taken off the board and the other becomes MacGuffin to move the story.
And Marrina never really feels like she fits as a part of the team. Like her being removed with Namor here at the end of issue 4, she isn't part of the team. She's not hanging out at their base. She's not squabbling over who ate her peanut butter in the break room. You know, she's not part of this workplace comedy. She's kind of grafted onto Alpha Flight, and yet they all feel loyalty towards her because reasons.
Lots of reasons. I also like when you mentioned their base, which is just like the Hudson's apartment.
The Master had a very 1983 sci-fi movie feel to him. Like, I could hear slow synth music, and the whole base had the vast and cold and empty feel I recall from early 80s sci-fi, like The Black Hole or even Superman's Fortress of Solitude.
I mean, that makes him sound incredibly cool. Like, it just does. Like, the idea that you've got, like, some sort of... I don't know, Berlin art house synth going as he's moving around. Oh man, we should maybe re-record his voice and give him a goofy German accent. But
well, he wouldn't have a German accent. He was a caveman.
I know.
Oh,
so as a villain, he has a better outing here than a lot of villains. He's no Pace Pot Pete. He's no Dr. Doom either.
I don't know. He's apparently a genius, and he has enormous resources, and he's going to survive the explosion. He's well on track to being a standard arch nemesis.
And that ends episode 5 of Why Not? Join us next time when we get 2 solo adventures featuring Puck and Snowbird, as well as the origin of Shaman.
Yay! You can find art clips for each episode and ask us questions at thewhynotpod.com blog. You can also see a picture of the custom patch of the week from Excelsior Embroidery Company. This week we get 2. An Alpha Flight logo, and a headshot of Guardian. We've got big plans for these patches, so stay tuned and let us know what you would like to see.
Why Not is recorded in Chicago, Illinois, and deep beneath stately Baker Manor in a fashionable neighborhood outside St. Louis. Why Not is produced by me, Tom Flynn, with assistance from Chris Baker.
Hi.
You can find us on Instagram, Imgur, and TikTok. Issues will be less than full-length real-time story and a short backup story featuring... I'm sorry, I have to do that again.
Yeah, I just made Tom break because I had to give my cat the finger because she won't get out from under my feet.
All I hear is a sharp... and then Chris, like, spasming and flipping off a cat. Okay, I'll see that again.